So talk to me about Potentia. What is it?
Sure, you bet. So Potentia is a social enterprise. Our organizing principle is to help neurodiverse individuals find opportunities.
Mhm.
I've got a son who's on the autism spectrum, and as I learned more about this group, I just fell in love with it and really learned a lot about it. In particular, the fact that there's 80% unemployment among college grads who are on the spectrum. So it's a real it's a group that can really use some advocacy. Very talented group, but a group that can use some help connecting with corporate America. And we help neurodiverse individuals connect with corporate America through programs, projects, and products.
So just define for me exactly what neurodiverse means.
You bet. Absolutely. Happy to. Yeah, and these are terms, by the way, that I've learned over the last few years myself. My son was diagnosed on the autism spectrum when he was 6,
Mhm.
and he's a teenager now. And as parents, we really, really kind of dove into what life was like for Charlie and autism as it related to our son. And admittedly, at that point, we didn't become experts in
Oh,
autism
sure.
even at that point. When he became a teenager, I realized through just seeing how he was developing and really the talents that he had, that I really needed to up my game and start thinking not just year to year like we were doing when he was in school, but thinking about what adult autism was going to look like for him. And so I began a research project around autism that led me to the idea of neurodiversity, which, to your question, Jane, includes things like ADHD and ADD, OCD, dyslexia, and makes up fully 20% of the population, 20% of the workforce, or
Well,
the hopeful workforce in corporate America today.
wouldn't it be fair to say it might make up 20%, but that would be just those that are diagnosed? Because
That's
there's
a
a
great point. Yeah, yeah, it's at least 20%. And it sounds like you know something wherever you speak, but about this population. But yeah, absolutely right. It's always difficult to forecast those numbers because you have so many people that either never get diagnosed or because of stigma diagnosed but don't disclose.
exactly. So now if we, and I'm actually worried about kids that are teenagers or young adults. I have a daughter who's a young adult, and they're very anxious and they're very, in today's world, we aren't we all a little bit, but I worry about that whole generation that is seeing so much and where are they all going, and this fits right into that area of helping them find an appropriate job and also to give them confidence. I'm assuming, correct?
Yes, yes. No, it's very, very true. Very true. So if you're, let's talk about autism for a minute, which is the fastest growing segment of neurodiversity, right? A lot of individuals who are autistic have tremendous gifts, but they also have some blind spots, and those are often around communication and reading, nonverbal cues and things like that. So growing up in what we call a neurotypical world, right?
Mm-hmm.
A world that includes people like you and me who are not on the autism spectrum. Um, a lot of times they get negative feedback, and they don't necessarily connect as well as they might with the wider world. And they don't always know why. People don't always tell them why, especially if they're not educated on the population. And so you get a lot of that negative feedback, and it can reinforce itself. So you may go into a situation like a job interview
Mm-hmm.
without that sense of confidence because you've struggled. Maybe you've struggled in school. Maybe you did really well academically, but in terms of making friends with neurotypicals and things like that, you might have had some real challenges. So yeah, we see that self-confidence and making your way in this world is something that we work on quite a bit. We also work, by the way, with the employers to help them meet these applicants halfway, and that's a really important part of what we do.
So who are some of these employers?
Boy, there are. I would want to start with there are sort of some pioneers in this area of neurodiversity employment that we stand on their shoulders, right? When I started researching as a dad for my son, not knowing that we would found Potentia, later on. I was really just trying to help support him and again figure out how we'd help him be his best self. Some of the research that I did led me to companies like SAP, Microsoft, Ernst & Young, Chase. These are household names that have decided that hiring neurodiverse individuals is great for the bottom line. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the first real eye-openers for me, that on the one hand, you have this 80% unemployment rate. On the other hand, you have these leading companies that are saying, no, this is a competitive advantage. We're not just doing this because it's a feel-good, although there is a lot of goodwill that's generated from it. We're doing it because it has real tangible results, and it's a competitive advantage for us. So those companies are ones that started the program. When we launched Potentia, we thought, I thought that I might be able to, break through and work with some small companies in Texas and maybe kind of move along. My first big customer was Chevron. My second
pretty
customer,
good one.
yeah. My second customer was GE Baker Hughes. So, I pretty quickly learned that, hey, we might be onto something here.
Well, so when you said it's good for the bottom line, explain that.
So there are a number of reasons for this, and there's been a lot of data to actually study it. One thing that I cite right off the bat is low turnover numbers. So especially these days with with millennials and Gen Z, turnover, especially in the STEM fields, can be quite high. And the loss of productivity and revenue when you have to constantly retrain people is significant. Well, the turnover amongst our population, amongst the neurodiverse population, is typically less than 5% a year, even in these high demand areas.
Wow.
So just based on the cost of turnover, you accrue some real financial benefits. We also see that innovation goes up because these individuals literally think differently. They approach problems differently. So you might have a really talented group of people, neurotypicals, who are really working on a thorny problem. All of a sudden you introduce some neurodiversity into the mix and you get some creative solutions, and that innovation can really be a competitive advantage. The third thing I would say is skill acquisition is really high. So our folks tend to pick up new skills really quickly. So you've got innovation, you've got low turnover, you've got new skill acquisition. You put all those things together, you've really got an ideal worker in a lot of cases.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So do you work with individuals, or you match individuals with companies, or how does it work?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and the answer is yes. Our mission is to really try to move the needle on this unemployment number. And my background in recruiting and workforce management has told me that the best way to do that is to focus on the employers first. Mm-hmm. And so we really want to go out and talk to these employers and help them first identify ones that are good core fits for what we're doing, good core values fit, but also have some real business needs they're trying to solve for, right? Once we find those companies, we want to help move them from interested but uninformed to successful practitioner of neurodiversity. And if we can move them from column A to column B, what we find is that once we move those companies from column A to column B, we're able to create opportunities in bunches, because the companies see the benefit, then they want to embrace it, they want to start a program. Then we're able to recruit candidates for pre-existing roles, but we're able to recruit them into companies that have already been trained in how to recruit, onboard, and manage folks on the spectrum successfully, right? Mm-hmm. Because it isn't just getting them into the company, it's helping them to get through that first 90 days and really get up to speed. And so when they find that they're in a place where they can gain that traction and have that support, they just need a company that can meet them halfway. Yeah. And when they have that, then not only are we able to bring those people into those jobs, but they stick and they do really well and they advance within the organization, which is really exciting.
So let me get this straight. So you basically go into the companies, you get them on board with this whole concept, and do you provide them some kind of training help, or you give them how do you get them so that they really start to follow up on what you're doing?
So the first thing, like any good workforce program, is you've got to align with them, and they've got to understand what the benefits are. All right. So you run it like any workforce program. You want to understand, what are the goals? What are they trying to achieve? What are the metrics? Right? How can we look back and say that this was successful? Right? And so we scope it. We typically identify a pilot area where we've got managers who really have a need and want to participate in this process. And then we bring them through. So the program that we're talking about, which is one of the offerings at Potentia, is called STARS, and STARS stands for Spectrum Training, Recruitment, and Support. And the reason that it's phrased that way is the training's got to come first.
Right.
So we train these folks on how to do these things, how to meet applicants halfway. They don't need to turn their business on its head, but they just need to take their existing best practices, maybe tweak them a little bit, and then they're ready to start interviewing candidates that we've pre-screened for them for pre-existing roles. But the way the interview is a little bit different, the way that you onboard is a little bit different, and so before we introduce the candidate, you're right, we train the employer, make sure they're ready to go. So it's training, then it's recruitment, and then it's support for both sides. So both the manager and the new hire need a little bit of training, especially during that first 90-day period to launch and have success.
Wow, that sounds really, really terrific. How have you been affected by COVID and all of this?
COVID's been interesting. Where do I start? It's
I don't know.
Right. I mean, we're a relatively new business. We've been around for about 2 years. So we're as a newer business, we felt we had the opportunity to pivot, right, in a way that maybe bigger businesses might not have been as able to. In terms of the STARS program, I would say it's exceeded my expectations.
Wow.
Our STARS
Great.
clients have all stayed with us. They've all continued their programs. And one of the interesting things that we've seen is that our programs work really well in a remote environment. So we had one STARS program that started with people working traditionally, on site, doing the training and doing the interviewing on site. They actually started the program, and then 2 weeks in, they were told they needed to quarantine and work from home. And we actually had one guy who had relocated for this job. A lot of our candidates for relocation is something that we look at. It isn't always the best thing. We really make sure that the folks have that support, right, to make sure that they're going to be successful. In this case, this was an individual who was more than ready to move to a new city. When he got there, it turned out that the role that he'd been hired for changed on day one. So he was presented with a real challenge, and then 2 weeks in, quarantine. So challenge on top of challenge, and which would have been tough for anybody. And yet he went through the 12-week program, got an offer, and is now doing phenomenally well.
That's great.
So we've had to make some changes to STARS. We had a second program that we did completely virtually, from training to recruiting. The first time folks set foot on site with the customer was on day one to pick up their laptops and then turn around and go back and start working remotely. And our guys work really well in that environment. Our guys are, we kind of joke about it that our folks on the spectrum are just fine with social distancing. They do a lot of that. As long as they know what the rules are and what the process is, and so if they know what's expected of them, they do really well. Another thing that we found is that neurodiversity programs rely on really good communication. And so because we emphasize that in our STARS program, we've found that, and we do feedback with every client we work with, not only has the communication improved with our folks, but the communication has improved amongst the managers and the entire teams, because they've been thinking about how to work with our guys. Managers are actually becoming better communicators with their whole teams, and that's really worked well during COVID, when you don't have somebody right in front of you all the time. You've got to really issue clear direction, make sure that what you're saying is understood. So, there's certainly been some bumps in the road with COVID, but I've been so impressed with how our folks have managed it. They've really done well.
And it sounds like, your timing for part of this is pretty good, because maybe a lot of these people actually work better remotely, and it's easier for them. And so if they can, it gives them a real opportunity too. That's fantastic. I love hearing that story. It also strikes me that in this, we've talked so much about being inclusive in this country now. Well, we keep talking about it mostly in terms of race or ethnicity or gender, but we so rarely talk about inclusivity, meaning those who think differently or have this neurodiversity. So again, your timing in that part may be really, really smart as well.
I think it is. And we talk a lot about the overlaps and the intersectionality with autism, for example, doesn't discriminate. There are plenty of folks of color who are autistic, right? Or folks who come from different backgrounds, or male or female, or we just place someone who's on the spectrum who happens to be trans with one of our clients, right? I mean, so there's a lot of overlap, in these different areas. And so, for us, we think you can't talk about diversity and equity and inclusion without including neurodiversity in that mix, because it really cuts across all of those different groups that that we're trying to create more opportunities for.
So tell me a story. You just talked about this trans person as you placed, but give me a sense of a story about one of your most successful candidates or people that you placed. I'd just love to get a feel of what they're like. Sure.
Well, and the one I was just mentioning, the individual who relocated, is a real success story for us. I mean, he's doing phenomenally well. Just walking in day one and it's a whole new job than what you interviewed for would be tough for anybody, right? Had another situation with an individual. So a lot of our folks are because of that 80% unemployment rate, a lot of our folks are unemployed, but a lot of our folks are underemployed. And they may be in situations where they're able to find a job, but it's nowhere near the potential earning wise or work wise where they could play, right, if they were given the opportunity. And during that cohort I was speaking of earlier, where it was 100% remote, we had an individual who was working in a tough environment, really hardworking guy, had some health issues himself, but was just a worker, just a guy who just showed up and just wanted to do a good job. And we went through the program. Again, it was all remote, but then he started to get to know who his manager would be, and he started to get to know the mentor who would be assigned to him as part of the program, because we're always assigned mentors. And he went through the interview process. He got the job. He called me up on day one in tears because he was so happy, because he had never experienced a supportive work environment where the manager was really invested in his success, really wanted him to succeed. And it just touched me so deeply that he was so emotional about it and so happy about it after just day one. And so I mean, those kinds of stories, they just touch your heart, and that kind of loyalty, by the way, that he now feels toward his employer is priceless. So I'm very fortunate, really blessed to be able to work in this environment and to see those types of success stories happen.
That's fabulous to hear, and it must just make it all the hard work you put into creating this and actually making it success. I mean, that's worth every minute you've done. And what about your son, Charlie? I know you said he's a teenager now, but he must be very proud of you.
He is. He is. He is the inspiration. I tell the story that really he is he lit the spark for Potentia. So I was fortunate. I was running a global staffing company.
Hmm.
I'd gotten to a point. It was kind of a destination job that I'd had, and it really set that as a goal for myself. And I've been lucky enough to get there thanks to a lot of people who taught me the business and had supported me over the years.
Uh-huh.
But Charlie, who had been diagnosed at 6, was now 16, and we were actually back up in Massachusetts, where I'm from, at my mom's funeral, and she'd struggled with this was a couple of years back. She'd really struggled with Parkinson's disease and had a difficult time of it. So it was bittersweet. She was at peace, but obviously we missed her terribly. And we're at the funeral, and I'm watching my 16-year-old son comfort my father, and it just hit me. It hit me right then that I really needed to raise my game. I really needed to not just think about year to year for him as a young person, but really think about what adult autism was going to look like, and for someone like Charlie who has such potential, I wanted to see him reach that potential and do everything I could as a father to help support that. And so that really began a research project that led me to talk to businesses and individuals around the world. First, just as a dad, just in a supportive role. And then the more that I did, the more that the businessman in me started, listening to this conversation too, and said, boy, there's a real need here. And I think that, whatever skills I have, I would love to put them toward, trying to be of service and trying to move the needle on this challenge that we face. So, but Charlie deserves the credit because it really all started with him.
Well, that's fantastic. And I'm sure that, we all get these great ideas, and want to do something and as you put it, move the needle, but very infrequently do we actually act on them. So to have had the heart and soul to do that is really commendable.
Oh,
Really
thank you.
wonderful. How do people find out more that maybe have someone they know or even themselves that might be looking to get some help, or businesses that are interested? How do they find out more? They go to your website, or?
They go to the website. So the website is potentiaworkforce.com.
Mm-hmm.
Potentia is like potential without the L.
That's what I figured.
Yeah. It's Latin. It's Latin for power or force. And so we want to bring some power to that workforce. So that's how Potentia, how we got the name, and we like to play with potential, obviously. But it's potentiaworkforce.com, and then the email address is just info@potentiaworkforce.com. We have people who respond to any question, whether it's a candidate who's looking for work. It's a business who's thinking about maybe leveraging some of our services, and again, that could be recruiting through STARS. Potential Projects is our group where we outsource work for companies. We launched that earlier this year, and fortunate that we did. This was pre-COVID, but we thought that, well, at some point there's going to be companies out there that maybe can't do a hiring program, but they still have work that they need to get done, and they might want to outsource that work. And as we started to talk to all this talent, we said, we can run projects for people and give them the opportunity to experience innovation through neurodiversity, but do it on more of a turnkey basis,
Right.
where we could build a website for them, or we could do analytics work for them, or what have you. And that's been really successful for us. That's been really an exciting development, because that allows us to be an employer ourselves. As we win these projects, we're able to bring people on internally ourselves. And so, yeah, if companies are interested in that, or they're interested in our Potentia Health Registry, which we can talk about. We've actually got 3 different service offerings. But any of those candidates, family members, just reach out to us at info@potentialworkforce.com, and we'd love to talk to you.
Well, that sounds fabulous. So hopefully we've given people some insight and given them some good information. And I love what you're doing. So congratulations on a job well done.
Oh, thank you so much.